For many years, it was thought that Carroll Shelby's most peculiar Mustang was lost forever. Not concealed, not lost, destroyed. Subsequently, a crew discovered a red coupe sitting in Texas like a ghost from the 1960s after following the incorrect rumor to the correct VN number and opening the trail Shelby left behind. It wasn't only uncommon. It was an automobile that had no business surviving. Collectors' understanding of Shelby's covert experiments was altered once they realized what it was. The Texan who built cars like weapons. Before Carroll Shelby rose to prominence in American racing, he was a racer from Texas who refused to slow down despite having a failing heart. Shelby did not originate from corporate engineering's refined realm. He was born with competitiveness, grit, and instinct. Speed made sense to him. Therefore, he raced. He prevailed because he saw machines as living entities that could be moved, adjusted, disassembled, and reassembled until they complied. By 1959, Shelby had accomplished something that most drivers can only imagine. Together with Roy Salvadori, he and Aston Martin won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. However, his body was already working against him. He had to stop racing due to a heart problem, which would have been the end of the narrative for most men. It was the beginning for Shelby. He would defeat Europe from the workshop if he couldn't defeat it while driving. The Shelby legend truly starts there. He pictured what might happen if American V8 power were added to the lightweight British AC Ace. The outcome was the Shelby Cobra, a vehicle so brutal and unpolished that it seemed almost impolite in comparison to the refined European vehicles it was designed to disgrace. Subtlety was not Shelby's genius. It was a mixture. Remove the bullshit, add American horsepower, take European handling, and create something that alarmed the establishment. The man Ford needed by the middle of the 1960s, Ford was in need of Carroll Shelby due to an issue that it was unable to resolve amicably. Henry Ford II wanted to outperform Ferrari in endurance racing so strongly that he spent a lot of money trying. Ford's GT40 project had potential, but it required the kind of brutal racing instinct Shelby had already demonstrated. The GT40 evolved from a costly concept when Shelby American took over the program. It was turned into a weapon for Le Mans. History was the outcome. After defeating Ferrari at Le Mans in 1966, Ford continued to win in 1967, 1968, and 1969. Shelby's contribution to that change solidified his status as anything more than a builder, tuner, or boisterous Texan with a knack for marketing. When American manufacturers needed speed to cease being theoretical, they turned to him. Ford also aimed to give the Mustang genuine performance credibility at the same time. Shelby knew how to make the Mustang dangerous, but Lee Iacocca recognized its potential for sales. In 1965, the GT350 was introduced, and in 1967, the GT500. These vehicles weren't just Mustang variations. They were declarations. Shelby brought teeth to a mass-market pony car. Why Shelby prototypes matter. It's crucial to realize that not all of Shelby's most intriguing vehicles ended up in showrooms. The Cobras, GT350, GT500, and GT40 became icons, which is why the public remembers them. However, there is a messier world of prototypes, experiments, rejected parts, test mules, technical concepts, and cars that were never meant to exist behind every well-known performance vehicle. The true mystery starts there. Prototype automobiles in the 1960s frequently had short lifespans. After testing engines, suspensions, brakes, bodywork, or style concepts, they were either crushed, sold in secret, or thrown away. Future auction values were not on the minds of those who constructed them. They were considering business directives, production choices, race outcomes, and timeframes. A test car could vanish if it had fulfilled its purpose. That's what gave Little Red's story its potency. People thought it had vanished, Because it had been destroyed for decades. Not concealed in an opulent private vault, not seated beneath a flawless museum cover. Destroyed. Because prototype cars were frequently smashed once their work was over, such assumption made sense. However, Little Red had fallen between the cracks, making it one of the most significant unsolved mysteries in Shelby. The car everyone thought was dead. Little Red was a prototype 1967 Shelby GT500 EXP that wasn't like the Shelbys most individuals visualize. It wasn't a fastback. It was immediately peculiar because it was a notchback coupe. Little Red was one of the few notchback coupes to ever sport the Shelby nameplate, along with the 1968 Green Hornet. It would be valuable only for that feature, but its true significance came from what it stood for. Ford and Shelby American evaluated concepts that could influence future performance and design with Little Red, an experimental car that served as a mobile laboratory. Big block power, supercharging experiments, styling ideas, and the route that would ultimately shape the California Special Mustang were all associated with it. Shelby, it wasn't your typical production. It was a question on wheels. If Shelby continued to push the Mustang, what might it become? That's why it became so annoying when it vanished. Collectors were aware of its existence. There were references for historians. People had old records, memories, images, and rumors. However, the automobile itself had vanished. For many years, the apparent explanation that Ford or Shelby had consigned it to the crusher like so many other prototypes was accepted by many. The story would end if that were the case. However, assuming that a lost car is dead simply because the paperwork indicates it should be is the riskiest assumption in automotive history. Green Hornet opens the door. The Green Hornet made the hunt for Little Red much more intense. The Green Hornet, a 1968 Shelby GT500 prototype, belonged to Craig Jackson, chairman and CEO of Barrett Jackson. It was also an experimental notchback Shelby with cutting-edge features including independent rear suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, and electronic fuel injection. Green Hornet seemed to be decades ahead of the Mustang world from which it originated. Jackson and restoration expert Jason Billups started having serious conversations about Little Red during the Green Hornet repair and study. Could Little Red have survived if Green Hornet had? It sounded nearly unfeasible. For years, collectors have been looking. It was thought by experts to have been destroyed, stolen, crushed, or lost beyond repair. However, Billups thought a trail might still exist. At that point, this story surpasses the made-up hidden garage version. The actual someone removing a cover from a covert vehicle when it was illuminated by fluorescent lights did not answer the mystery. It was resolved through investigation, through documentation, by taking an alternative approach to the issue. Using the Shelby serial number, everyone had been looking for Little Red, but their search had proved fruitless. The breakthrough came when Billups and the crew realized they required the original Ford VIN. The VIN that changed everything. The vehicle had two identities: the original Ford identity, concealed beneath it, and the Shelby identity that everyone looked for. The dead end appeared when the researchers started examining the Ford VIN trail rather than just the Shelby serial number. The VIN eventually pointed them in the direction of Texas, after guiding them through previous records, registrations, and ownership history. This is the original twist. Since no one searched, the car that no one knew existed was not hidden. Because everyone was searching for the incorrect name, it was concealed. Identity is crucial in the history of collectible cars. A car can become well known with a badge. It can be made real with a VIN. In the space between the two realities, Little Red had become lost. People only looked in one direction because of the Shelby legend. The true solution was in the Ford documents. The team located the vehicle in a rural area of North Texas on March 3, 2018. It wasn't perched like a gem in a museum. If you didn't know what you were looking at, it was easy to miss because it was incomplete, rough, and weathered. Both the transmission and the engine were broken. There were no body panels. It had been sitting with other vintage vehicles. It would have seemed to most people to be just another worn-out Mustang shell. It was the holy grail for those who comprehended the body, the VIN, and the hints. The Texas field that had a legend. The picture is nearly flawless. An automobile from the height of Shelby's Ford heyday, thought to be wrecked for 50 years, is sitting in Texas, waiting for the perfect question to be asked. Because it eliminates the fantasy, that setting is important. Perfect conditions did not maintain Little Red. Accident, movement, disregard, and miscommunication allowed it to live. It went through owners who weren't really aware of what it was. In the end, it was transferred, stored, stripped, and abandoned. That adds to the amazing survival. Because prototype automobiles frequently don't have the same level of protection as production cars from collectors, they are more vulnerable. It can be divided if no one knows what it is. The paperwork can be disregarded if it is unclear. The body may be mistaken for something far less significant if it appears too commonplace. Because no one eliminated Little Red at the appropriate time, it lived. The story went from rumor to history when it was verified by Craig Jackson, Jason Billups, and Mustang specialist Kevin Marty. It was more than simply a red Mustang. It was the Shelby GT500 EXP prototype that was lost. A car that was thought to have been deleted appeared in the record all of a sudden. Why?